Hello everyone, Dr. Mike here from TCOM 101. In the next couple of videos I want to talk about an incredible technological development called the Internet. It could be, the Internet, the most important digital innovation of all time. For the first time in human history, we have a global system of interconnected computer networks, the Internet. Think about all of the changes that the Internet has introduced to our worlds. It's one of the most significant innovations in the history of humankind. It's changed virtually every aspect of our lives. What is the Internet? It's not one network, it's a massive network of networks. It's a network of computers that spans the whole world. The Internet is really a connection of billions of different computers and devices and millions of smaller networks that together form this worldwide telecommunications network. So the Internet is a global phenomenon, and its impacts have been profound for all of humanity. Now, there's a lot of information flowing on the net. Think about all of it, the email, all the files being transferred, the streaming media make up a huge amount of the Internet bandwidth, the World Wide Web portion of the Internet, that interactive and dynamic part of the Internet that we enjoy, plus all of the video, the audio, the text that's streaming through the Internet in real time. A lot of incredible information. Maybe more importantly, it's become the central point of convergence in our lives. It's where we turn for music, entertainment, films, news, communication with other people. So I want to give you a little history of the Internet. Now, the Internet really was developed here in the United States. I think we need to start with a little discussion about Sputnik. In 1957, during the Cold War, after World War II, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial Earth satellite, and this launched the space race and the nuclear arms buildup. Okay, and Sputnik scared America. We were worried that we were being left behind as the Russians took over space. And it caused a lot of thinking in this country about improving our national defense. So the Internet really comes out of the Defense Department and concerns during the Cold War about national security. The Internet comes from the Defense Department. The Internet originated when the ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, a part of the Defense Department, began a network, the first kind of national network called ARPANET. This was back in 1969. Okay. Now, the goal of the military, the Defense Department, was to build a computer network that would continue to work, to function in the midst of some war or natural disaster or some cataclysmic activity. The goal was to build a network that would continue to communicate. Now, how could you build a network like this? Well, scientists discovered that messages, digital messages, could be divided into smaller packets of information. And these different packets would wind their way through the network, each on an individual basis. Okay. Now, if a computer or a server somewhere along the way stopped working, the packets would find some other way to get to their final destination. They would automatically find an alternative route. So look at this little graphic. You can see that if any one of these servers or computers or components was destroyed, the messages could still manage to find a way to be assembled at their final destination. This is called packet routing and packet switching. And this is the basic technology of the internet today, packet switching. So the first use was in the Defense Department, ARPANET, okay, to build a military communications network. Now, meantime, other folks were learning about the power of network computing and trying to find ways to make it pragmatic and useful. One of these persons was Ray Tomlinson, who recently passed away, but he was sort of the father of email. He brought email to the network. He picked the @ symbol as a way to specify email address and worked out the protocols for sending email. This happened in 1972, long before the internet became popular. Another big breakthrough was a couple of years later in 1974 when Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn, a couple of more fathers of the internet, developed a technique called TCP, Transmission Control Protocol. This allowed all of these different networks to understand each other, to speak the same language so that they could be connected. All right, now, many people were starting to hear about this amazing early communications network, ARPANET. And during the 70s, a lot of universities and research firms found it useful and began to connect to it, to share information and to communicate with each other. As the network grew, all this diversity posed a security risk. In 1983, the military segment broke off and became BillNet, the military network. Now, another important development was domain name system. Okay, that came about in 1983. You're familiar with the high-end domain names. .com is a commercial site, .gov, governmental.edu, education.org, should be a nonprofit organization. Okay, and there are many other domain names out there. In fact, there's an international group that approves of these and assigns the domain names. All right, in 1986, this is about a decade before the internet really started to take off, a group called the National Science Foundation started something called the NSFNet. And it was, like ARPANET, an early national backbone for internet traffic. You have to remember, the internet traffic back then was limited to text, okay? Just data and text. The National Science Foundation set up an early network and played an important role in developing and promoting an early internet. It still was not used by commercial firms or by the average citizen, okay? Strictly the scientist. Now, a big breakthrough came in 1989 when a British man, Tim Berners-Lee, coined the term World Wide Web. He's the father of the World Wide Web. He had this idea to connect data and pages and sites on the internet using something called hyperlinks. You know, hypertext. It's hyped up, strong text. You can click on it and something happens. It takes you to another information resource. Okay? Tim Berners-Lee had the vision of a network of computers that could be connected via these hypertext links. A very important figure, and still very concerned about what happened to the World Wide Web and the internet. He's an advocate for issues like net neutrality and privacy rights, as many of the other internet founders are still today. Now, in the early 1990s, the National Science Foundation lifted the restrictions that prohibited commercial entities from using the early backbone, the NSFNet. And that is when the internet started to flourish. It was in the 1990s, especially the mid-1990s, when commercial and personal use of the internet exploded. It became very popular and increased dramatically. Now here are a few more historical developments. The first browser. In 1993, a fellow named Mark Andreessen and his colleagues created something called Mosaic, which was the very first web browser. Certainly not as sophisticated as today's browsers. Okay, but you need a browser in order to be able to look at the hypertext documents and to use the World Wide Web. Okay, now this quickly developed into a commercial firm called Netscape Corporation. And in 1994, Netscape introduced the first big popular browser program. It was called Navigator. And they sent these out on CD-ROMs to millions of people to try and get them to load it on their computer and to start using the internet. Now, Netscape is long gone. Its remnants still exist in Foxfire and the Mozilla browsers, but other browsers have achieved popularity during a real series of browser wars. Okay? Right now, the dominant browser, of course, is Google Chrome. Okay? That's the most popular. I think it has about 60% share of the market. All right, so we see the first browser program, Netscape Navigator. At the same time, we see the birth of the private internet service providers, the ISPs. Now, the first ones were all dial-up, okay, like America Online. For many millions of Americans, this was their first access to the internet, a company called America Online. And once you got their disc in the mail, plus Netscape, you were ready to go to start gaining access to the internet. So America Online was a hugely important company in its day. All right, so we've got the browser, we've got the internet service providers, and at the same time, some of the large telecom corporations like AT&T were also involved in building out the backbone capability of the internet to make it stronger and more robust and more useful. So again, in the 1990s, commercial and personal use of the internet exploded. The internet became popular and started dominating a lot of aspects of our lives. Now, here are a few other milestones in web history. In 1995, we saw the birth of Yahoo, which was the very first web search engine. You know, it's difficult to use the web that contains a glut of information without a search engine to help us locate the material that we're interested in. The very first search engine was Yahoo, and it was very popular. Of course, now the number one search engine is Google, which has about a 90% share of the market. Google did come up with a better set of algorithms and a better set of techniques for helping us find the relevant information. Another important early development was 1995 when the Real Player was introduced. This was really the first streaming media device for the internet. It was the first media player capable of streaming audio and video on the internet. It was low resolution. Okay, it couldn't even compare to some of the great streaming we get today through the internet, but people could, for the first time, put audio and video out on the internet to share. And now 1995 was also important because we also saw the birth of e-commerce, which has become such an important part of the economy. Two of the most important e-commerce companies were started in 1995. Amazon.com was launched. Okay, one of the first major companies to sell goods over the internet. And it has expanded greatly since the late 1990s. And its owner, Jeff Bezos, is now the richest man in the world. Also, Amazon is the biggest cloud computing company. Look at the logo. Notice you can find anything from A to Z. All right, the other company that emerged was eBay in 1995, the first big online auction service, okay? And along with eBay, of course, was its component called PayPal, which really helped this idea of e-commerce on the internet. eBay still exists as a successful kind of retail company. And of course, because of Amazon, eBay, and other big online companies, we've seen the death of the shopping malls across the country. Okay, another interesting historical development happened back in 1996 when Macromedia released a product called Flash. And Flash was very popular. It still exists, but some platforms don't support it anymore. Really, the future is not learning Flash, but maybe something called HTML5. But anyway, Flash gave people the ability to create some really cool animations. Okay? It gave people the power to create very interesting stories using animations and also interesting websites, games, okay, and other experiences. Another milestone, Netflix was established in 1997. Yes, Netflix goes back that far. You know, its first business model was DVDs by mail. You'd order the movie on Netflix and they would send you the DVD. You'd watch it and send it back. Well, Netflix in the 21st century was one of the first companies to have a vision of delivering the movies by streaming them through the internet. And so, you know, there's no really any significant amount of DVD by mail business now. Okay, Netflix is the world's biggest streaming giant, but its roots go back to 1997. Okay. Now, in 1998, Google was born. And Google Incorporated was launched. Its mission? To organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. Do you understand the awe with which we should consider that mission, to organize all the world's information and then make it accessible to everybody? Well, Google has been a highly successful company. Actually, the name of the parent company now is Alphabet. But Google controls, you know, the Android operating system, a large part of the cell phone marketplace, the computers like Google Chrome, some cell phones, the search engine, the browser. Okay, it has some, I think, most of the advertising business in this country. It's become a giant and important company. All right, let's talk about something called file sharing, which is the theft of intellectual property on the internet. And this first happened with music, and college students were amazed they could get all this free music off the internet from some program called Napster. And this was a file sharing service created by a guy named Sean Fanning back in the late 1990s. And it was the first widely used peer-to-peer sharing service. Had a major impact on people, especially university students who ran to it, and the industry, which suffered because this hurt sales. People were stealing music. Now, the courts had no tolerance for companies like Napster. The federal courts, just a couple of years after it started, shut Napster down to prevent the illegal trading of copyrighted music on its network. Now, there have been many, many other, places that have popped up on the web where you could very easily, lift the music. I think the most popular way to do this today is YouTube to MP3 rip. Right? That's probably the dominant way that people steal their music today. But the courts have always upheld the copyrights of the musicians and the writers and the performers. All right, that's all I've got for this little video. In the next lecture, we'll talk about Apple. The birth of Apple is a major, major company in the TCOM world. But until then, please take care of yourself and each other, and I will see you very soon. Bye-bye.